Are you overly driven by what people think? If you think you might be, watch this video. Hi, I'm Mike Targus, retired Marine, founder of Center Desk Leadership Coaching. Did 21 years in the Marine Corps, retired as a battalion commander, and have worked for 13 years in project management, engineering, and sales. I've been on both sides of the fence, military and civilian. And the topic for today is that silent voice in our head that causes us to overly try to impress people or gain unnecessary agreement in things when we really should just be deciding things for ourselves. Most of us don't realize that at one point or another, maybe now even, we're being driven by some sort of silent critic. And it's not the people on our team, it's not the boss, it's ourselves. It's that voice in the back of your mind that says you have to impress people or you have to gain agreement on everything you do. But here's the truth about it. If you're constantly trying to impress or get agreement on everything, you're going to eventually stop leading altogether. Here's the problem. And you see this everywhere. Take, for example, when you write emails. You write it, you rewrite it, you rewrite it again. Why are you doing this? Are you really adding benefit by changing the information in there? Or are you trying to soften the blow or cater your message to too wide of an audience? Are you thinking of particular people and thus changing the message for the group? You're trying to soften the decision that you need to make. And is your goal unanimous approval before you make a decision? Or maybe you're in a meeting and you're just letting everybody talk and then you end the meeting without making any sort of decision at all. You think maybe you're doing the right thing by getting everybody's opinion, but the reality is people are seeing you as less dependable and even less trustworthy. Think of it this way. The team isn't following you at that point. They're just listening to the flow of information coming from you that's really not headed anywhere. And they're going to realize that the feelings of the group are probably preventing you from making a decision or just making such a weak decision that it really doesn't help anything. It doesn't provide any direction. They can see that you're overly concerned with the reactions of the other people in the room. And even if they're one of those people, that's not what they want. But they want to be heard, yes, but they don't expect you to go with every sort of opinion or feeling they have on the situation at hand. They don't want that responsibility. They want you to shoulder that responsibility. And people understand that it's not always going to go their way. And what happens when you let the opinions of too many people influence your decisions is that the decisions, they're not only going to be weak, but they're going to be defensive in nature. They're not going to be proactive, and people are going to sense that. So why do we get trapped into thinking like this? First reason is called the spotlight effect. We tend to think that people are overly concerned with us, when in reality, their main interest is themselves. They're not watching you that closely. Your brain is exaggerating the amount of attention they're actually giving you. And instead of being in a relaxed atmosphere or thriving in a relaxed atmosphere along with your team, you're actually perceiving it as almost like an interview or a performance review. And it's not. And you need to realize that their interest primarily is how whatever is going to come out of this is going to affect them. Another thing that can trip up a leader is called negativity bias. What you need to realize is that we place more emphasis on negative outcomes than positive ones. And if you can imagine this, if you have a group of 10 people in your team and you're talking with them, but you have maybe one or two that you will push back on just about anything you say, you're going to be preoccupied with those one or two people instead of considering what is the best thing for the group or even the consensus or the support of the other 8 people. And this is your brain watching for threats. It's kind of a survival mechanism. But in leadership, it can really dilute what you're trying to get accomplished. It can distract you from the goal that you're trying to achieve. Next thing that you need to be aware of is that a social threat or feeling that you may not be accepted or what you're saying is not going to be accepted or that you'll be shunned or put to the side. The part of the brain that processes that, same that processes physical pain. So the thing to keep in mind is we are really wired to be socially accepted. This is one of the first things that you learn as a new manager or in your leadership path. In reality, you have to resist this and you have to be out there and be decisive to get things done. And we protect our ego at great cost. In fact, the mission or the goal for the group can really take a back seat to us trying to protect our image, our ego, how we feel about ourselves. And this requires you to be really honest with yourself about how big of a problem that is for you. And that's not easy to do, but unless you really confront that, you could really hesitate. You can be very washy or fickle, change your mind. And that's going to lose respect really quick. You ever worked for a bad leader in terms of the way they treated you or the way they treated people, if they were overly harsh or unreceptive to criticism themselves? If you have to be aware that you may be overcorrecting just to seek approval, to avoid how you felt about that person. Your subconscious really is playing it safe. It's protecting you. It's avoiding embarrassment, or it's avoiding those negative feelings that you experience from the other side. So if you have worked for somebody like that, you got to check yourself and make sure that you're not just doing the opposite without realizing it. But we think by gathering more input and letting everybody say their piece, there is some good in that. People do want to be heard, like I said. There's a high cost to that, potentially. If you're showing an inability to be decisive, the people are going to look at you and they're going to see that as inconsistency. They're not going to be able to rely on you to make the call when the time comes. And the reason they want you to do that, even though it might not seem like that, they want you to shoulder that responsibility so they can get on with life and do their part of the task. And when you're not consistent, people don't know who's going to walk through the door on any particular day. And they really need that. They need to come into work every day, and they need to know where you're coming from, because if they don't, they're going to be more guarded, and you're not going to get the amount or the quality of information you need to do your job. They're going to play it safe. An example of not being consistent as a leader would be sometimes you're very decisive. Sometimes you're making decisions with hardly any input. And on other days, you're just asking everybody in the room what they think. Either one can be right. Point is, people need to know who you are going to be on that day before you even show up. That way they can come prepared and ready to contribute. But if you don't do that, then you lose initiative. And if you're making overly conservative, safe decisions, defensive decisions, then they're going to mimic that. Maybe you're an experienced leader and you consider your leadership skills pretty sharp. You still need to be aware that people are going to mimic your emotions. And that's where leading by example comes from. Do the things that you want others to do in the way you want them to do them. The worst part of being inconsistent when you're a leader, though, is that erosion of trust from the team toward you. Your perceived authenticity starts to go down, and then people see you as living a performance more than anything. You may ask for people's input, and again, you should do that. You're going to look like you're just going through the motions. And conversely, if you say that you're there to make a decision, but you're overly concerned and letting everybody's opinions drive you, it's just an act. You can't lead if you're held hostage by other people's wants and needs and desires. How do we correct this? How do we make sure that we're doing the right things so we come off as confident as well as making the right decisions in the interest of the team? You don't want to just jump to the decision. You want to involve people, but you don't want to come off as arrogant or dismissive of other people. There is such a thing as being too direct. You should use time if it's available. But real leadership is about calm, but also having that edge. You want people to feel comfortable enough to contribute, but you also want them to know that when it's time for the decision, you're going to make it. And then you're going to expect the team to get on board and execute. And here's the way to do that. Prioritize the needs of the group, the task at hand that absolutely must be accomplished, over the approval of the group. Really what you're doing here is you're acting in the interest of the whole group, not changing course based on what you think just a couple people in the group are going to think. And you definitely don't want to think to yourself, is everybody going to agree, or is everybody going to be happy with this decision? You'll never get there. The next thing is you want to make decisions based off standard criteria, like a framework. You want stability in the team, and it starts with you as the leader. Focus on expressing that you're making decisions based on logic. And that logic is the same logic that you use day in and day out. The details might be a little different, but people see you evaluating the same criteria. Maybe it starts with quality, then it's profitability, then it's making best use of the talents on your team and aligning people's work with their interests. Come up with something like that where people can see the way that you're making decisions, a framework. And you want to avoid hearing reactive. People should be able to really see why you make the decision that you do. Third thing is, and this is a little bit of an internal consideration, You want your behavior to be value producing instead of likability. And if you think about effective leaders that you've seen or worked with, you may like them, you may have liked them, but that's not what probably stands out in your mind. What stands out in your mind is they were reliable. They were good at their job. Ability is not something that we would associate with respect. What do people respect? They respect consistency, decisiveness, the ability to gather information and then make a call. Because remember, people are interested in themselves and how things that are coming from you affect them primarily. They are probably interested in the team, but they are going to look at it first through their own lens. How does this affect me? And they have to know that your decisions are not for sale by other people who might get you first or some sort of relationship that they perceive as preferential. Unbiased, fair, and focused on the mission. That's what you want. And stay calm, but have that edge. Start out by listening. But when it comes time to make a decision, people have to know that that's it. We all have to be on board and we all have to make it happen. And think about this too. People need to know that just because somebody pushes back, maybe after the meeting or after the group breaks up, that you're not going to waver. If you want to destroy confidence in you quickly, be a fickle leader. Change direction. Not just change direction, but change direction because of small reasons. Complainers. And this is all tricky because you do want people to feel like they can contribute. You want them, you don't just want them, you have to assure them that their opinions matter. So how do you tell when an opinion should be one of those that you really do take into consideration and maybe change the decision that you're going to make? What opinions are those that shouldn't be considered? How do you do that? First reason is if you're getting feedback that you're being unclear, people don't understand, or even it might be something a little bit more personal, being too abrasive with people. That is going to quickly erode people's trust in you. And that's different than wanting to be liked. When people don't trust you, they don't tell you things, you become just that much more ineffective. This is one of the ways I've thought about this over the years is you're spending weeks and months and years even gaining the trust of the people around you. So if you're getting feedback that people don't understand where you're coming from, not just the specifics of the decision at hand, but if people are giving you feedback that they never know where you're coming from, maybe in one-on-one sessions, that is a reason to maybe change your approach. Next thing is you want to build a reputation for being thoughtful and decisive and looking out for the welfare of the team. So if you're making a series of decisions where you feel like that might be damaging your professional reputation, not your likability, but your professional reputation, the one that's helping you build trust with everybody, then that might be an example where you consider changing course. This could be you're executing a plan, maybe over the period of weeks or a couple months, and it's not going well. And you can tell people think it's because of the decisions that you're making. You got to be able to take a step back, get some feedback, and not be afraid to change course. But you want to do that in a way that it's obvious to people you're making a change of course for the right reasons. It's based on data, it's based on feedback, and it's logical. And then you do need to be concerned with people's perception of you. You want to develop a sense for gaining the respect or losing the respect of the people that you lead. One way to do this is you got to think about making yourself vulnerable. You got to look for opportunities to show people that you don't know everything. Some leaders, when they're insecure, they're not really confident in their position or the way that they interact with the team or they're standing in the team, they're going to tend to want to make it seem like they know more than they do. And the thing is, people can see that in 2 seconds. And then if they see you doing that, they're going to wonder why you're doing that. Are you trying to make yourself look good? And if so, it's not necessarily going to be the truth. It's going to be their perception. And you don't want to leave things like that up to the imagination. So don't let perception entirely drive your decision making, but you have to be aware of it in those areas where it affects trust. And then you got to distinguish between caring about what people think and letting people drive what you do, and then realize that caring what people think, getting that input, is not the same as just because they said it, that's what we're going to do. Or you don't let people's opinions be the plan, but you do get the opinions and consider them when making the plan and then eventually making the decisions that the plan needs. In other words, caring what people think is different than being driven by what people think. So we'll close here by 3 questions that you can ask yourself if you're concerned that you're being driven unnecessarily by the opinions of other people. When you're faced with making a decision, first ask, is this for the good of the group? Does this support the mission that we have and the things that we need to get accomplished? If it does, then you're about to make the right decision. Number 2, is what I'm about to do or decide, does that help me maintain or build more trust with the team? And the thing to recognize here is we're not talking about popularity, we're talking about trust. Are you going to be that dependable, consistent leader that people know when they walk through the door in the morning who you're going to be? And the third thing, and you really got to look in the mirror and ask yourself this, is, am I hesitating because of what just 1 or 2 people might think? We all experience fear as leaders, and that's a real common source of it, especially if you have strong personalities on the team, maybe people that have been there a long time. Maybe there's relationships in the organization that can be perceived, you can perceive those as a threat. It's a real thing, but you can't let the opinions of just 1 or 2 people sway you entirely. So in closing, leadership is not about selling your decision making. You can have a democratic approach where people get to speak and offer their input, but when the time comes, you got to make the decision and move on. And if your leadership style is focused on the mission at hand, all the while working to gain and maintain and build trust with the people around you, the people are going to follow you. They're going to follow you even when they disagree with a decision. So here's my challenge to you. This week, make one strong call that needs to be made. Don't worry as much about gathering input. Make a strong call. Make it in something that is fairly safe at first, and then watch the reaction of the people around you. It's going to be a good confidence builder. And over time, as a leader, when you see this work over and over again, your desire or your reliance on the opinions of people when you're making decisions is going to get less and less over time. You're going to feel it right away. I hope this video was useful for you. If you liked it, consider subscribing. I got stuff like this coming out all the time. No nonsense, straightforward videos. Thanks a lot.